afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for downloading the Faith Life Podcast, the Discovery Fellowship Church. And if you're joining us at breakfast, a special welcome to you. Enjoy the bacon, enjoy the eggs. If you're having some sausage or beans on toast, I don't know if we have any British listeners, but that is the height of their cuisine, beans on toast. And then I saw a video of a British TikToker the other day who had the audacity to say that their food was the best food in the world. And the height of their food, Matt, beans on toast. As always, I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, Pastor Matt. Pastor
hey, guys.
Matt, how are you doing today?
Good. Have you
ever had beans on toast? Like the British way of doing it.
No idea what that means, so no.
I don't know what they do.
On a tortilla with beef and cheese
so
and
it's
salsa
like a piece of toast and what looks like baked
tacos.
Beans.
Okay.
But I don't know if they're baked beans. I don't think they're barbecue flavored like we would do it. But that's what they look. That's what it looks like.
Boston baked beans, the candy.
No, unfortunately, that might be better.
I don't think that would be. Those are not great.
Anyway, if you've ever had beans on toast, what's the deal? Like, why is that so good? I don't know. But I feel like there's probably a cultural difference. Because, for instance, I've watched a lot of videos where British people try our food and they're like, biscuits and gravy, that sounds disgusting. But that's because biscuits to them means cookies and gravy's always brown gravy. So if that's what you thought of, like a cookie with brown gravy ladled over it, you would think that was disgusting also. But then you try it and you're amazed. As always, if you have not done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you downloaded this. And don't forget, send us email at podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com. Or leave us a comment on the YouTube. A lot of people, several people took that very seriously last week and left us a lot of comments. And I had said that, we'll read your emails that come in and we'll maybe even read your comments on YouTube. And one of the comments was like, wait, you will? So yeah, we will.
And you just did.
I just did. I just said it.
Thank you, what you will person.
Yeah, thank you, what you will. Now, here's the thing. When I see the comments, what's really funny about it is that it shows the timestamp on a lot of these, but not on all of them. And then, I don't have any context for what they're talking about. So while, yes, we will read these comments, at some point, we're going to have to try to decipher it's kind of like, this is kind of fun. It's like when we read like some of the letters that Paul writes, he's referencing some sort of controversy, but we don't know what it is as the readers now. So you kind of get to, based off his critique of it, you can kind of figure out what the problem was. It's similar here. Based off the comment, maybe we can remember what we were talking about without actually having to go back and watch it. But we'll get to all of that later. For now, let's jump in with the news.
The news. Is that our news theme song?
Yeah.
What is happening? I apologize to everyone listening right now.
Why?
That was something.
Don't you ever watch the news? The Weekly World News or whatever?
Oh, is that what you were doing?
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
I don't know. But they do that little...
Yep.
Time for the news. So, what's happening in the world, Matt? Anything jumping out at you? The Democratic National Convention is going on right now.
I heard about that. I saw, what's the guy's name who frequently goes on to college campuses?
Charlie Kirk was there.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yep.
He was walking around. This is all I've seen of the convention. He was walking around the outside of it. It was in Chicago, right?
Yes.
And he was kind of mocking the whole thing.
Yeah.
Talking about how they won't build a wall to protect our country, but they'll build a wall to protect their convention because there was just this huge wall around the convention center. And you have to have an ID to get into that place, but they'll let anyone vote. You don't have to have an ID to vote. But it's racist
to require that for voters.
Yeah.
And it's true.
The kind of hypocrisy with some of it was kind of ridiculous. But
well, speaking of that, we did get an email about that. It says, DNC and Christian Nation. Interesting how folks claim to be a Christian nation while the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth is on full display at the DNC. Free on-demand abortions and vasectomies. The U.S. has had 1 million sacrifices last year and increasing despite the number of sexless people are giving up. At the best we can say, the high places are not removed. So why would we expect God's protection and blessings on the country? Interesting.
I would say go back and listen to a sermon from 5 years ago, but that's been removed from the internet, so you can't do that.
Has it? Did we?
Yeah.
Has it been fully purged
you wiped
from
it.
existence?
Yep. But if you go a couple years later, around July 4th, go through our sermons. Pastor Rick did one, kind of talking about the whole God Bless America thing and how we've...
Right. Are we? So it's an interesting question, and there's a couple things that come in, and we've talked about this. We'll continue to talk about this politically. There's
politics,
a lot of a feeling of like you can't be a Christian and a Democrat. Some people would go that far. Now, I don't know if I could say that. I would just say that as both parties don't represent Christianity,
100%.
Including 100%. They both will, but do they both represent aspects of Christianity? Is there anything in the Democratic Party that will represent an aspect of Christianity? And if so, then all that would mean is that if you're, because like I've seen this group on Reddit lately that's like evangelicals for Kamala, and so would that just mean? It's a weird thing, but we often, I think, still would say if you are of this political party, you are not a Christian almost. Like, even if we wouldn't say that, we'd say that. And so my question would be, why wouldn't it be both ways?
Right. I think as Christians, we should more view ourselves as politically homeless because none of the two major parties that we have here in America represent Christ.
Right.
And as Christians, we are called to represent Christ. And so if we talk about this every time politics come up, but if my identity is in my political party, that's sin. Right. When you place your identity in anything outside of Jesus, you're sinning. And so you have to toe a very, very fine line here if you want to get into a conversation. Usually it ends up being an argument because politics, right? If you want to get into a conversation with someone about your political views and how, well, if you agree with them, then you can't be a Christian.
Right.
I'm going to go as far as say, well, if you agree with any side, that does not make or break you as a Christian.
Right.
And for you to place that judgment on someone else,
right,
would probably be inaccurate, or at least making judgments that is not our place to make.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think basically what we look at really is that, all right, the Republicans do X, Y, Z, whatever. And those are the ones that matter to me as a Christian. Right. And so that's where I identify. But I think we do need to be able to step out of ourselves maybe. And it's tough because those things that matter really matter. Right. And I think the biggest one is still the abortion issue.
Right.
And so if it is ending the lives of innocent children, it's hard to say I could support that side. But at the same time, if somebody says, look, I'm a Christian and Democrat Party supports XYZ, that really strikes me as important as a Christian. And so I have to deal with the fact that they allow these things that I don't like. In the same way that I can say as the Republican side, they support these things that matter. So I have to deal with these things that I don't agree with. Right. There's a mixed bag. And so because somebody's set of what speaks to them is different than the ones that speak to me, that alone isn't enough to say,
well, then you're not a
wrong.
Christian.
Right. Not a Christian. Now, again, I do think it's hard with the abortion one mixed in. But then there's an interesting hypothetical while we're on this political tangent. So this is not a true piece of data. I don't think. I've not looked this up. Let's say
we're making it up on the fly. Here we go.
Well,
guys.
That's why I said hypothetical.
I love it.
Let's say, let's put it forth a hypothetical scenario where you found out that the number of abortion dropped when a Democrat was in office. Let's say you found that number out.
Right.
Because of whatever reasoning, even if their policies were more in favor of it, the end result was less.
Right.
Would that mean as a Christian then, if that was our most important issue, we should then vote Democrats?
I think it's definitely something you have to consider if that is the issue you're making the number one thing.
Sure.
Right. I think you would have to absolutely consider that because the question is what matters most, the means to the end or the end itself? right? If the end itself is saving lives and the means you don't agree with, but it results in lives being saved,
right,
you have to consider that.
That's an interesting. And now, as our producer says, correlation is not causation always.
Absolutely.
You do have to know that. So in my hypothetical,
right,
it's because of their policies. Let's say.
Right. In the hypothetical situation, the correlation is the causation.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because sometimes correlation does causally affect. Just because it's not inherently that doesn't mean it's never that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All of that to say, it's an interesting thought experiment.
The good news is Jesus is still on his throne. He is still King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and no president of the United States will ever change that. Jesus still reigns. And so, again, we have to put our hope in him.
Right.
Because if we put our hope in any political party or any person as president, that's a lot of P words right there.
Yes.
It will fail us because they're human and they will fail us. And so my encouragement is the next couple months are going to be really rough on our spirits, on our souls, on our minds, our hearts. It's going to be rough because we're going to have to make a decision. I know most people probably already have their decision made. But no matter which of, I'm assuming one of the two current main candidates are going to be elected. One of them will win. They're both bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so at this point, you are voting for what you feel in your conscience is going to be best for, this is going to maybe turn some people off, our country. This has nothing to do with your Christianity. Because as Christians, we need to stop depending on the government to put forth Christian values.
Yes.
We need to be the ones going out, being the hands and feet of Jesus, not waiting for a president to do that or a policy to do that for us.
Right.
And so I vote based upon what's going to be best for the country and the people of the country, which, yes, abortion is a big part of that because the people of the country are dying.
Right.
Right. And so that is a huge part of my conviction when voting. There are dozens and dozens of other things I consider when thinking through who I'm going to vote for.
And to your point, it's like if we focused more on expanding God's kingdom as opposed to expanding the United States power, right? It wouldn't matter if abortion was legal or not. Because as people come to know God, they're not going to want to do that. They're not going to want to kill their kid. They're going to do everything
they can to save lives.
They're going to do everything they can to save lives. And so if you, and this is, I look back at like the early church was in a very, very hostile society to them. Much more like if we think in America, we face any kind of persecution, that's laughable compared to what they face in the early church, right? And not to mention other parts of the world right now.
But someone made a bad comment about me online one time.
Somebody said happy holidays. Ugh. They didn't say Merry Christmas. Now, look at what the early church did, though. They loved people. They went after people. And for instance, we've got a very similar, but again, even worse parallel we can look at. Ancient Rome, they didn't really consider you to be a person until like 2 or 3 years old, right? We've moved it back to before birth. Same concept where they would have, you could just say, you know what, I don't want this kid anymore. I'm going to abandon them on the side of the road, or you could abuse them or do whatever you want until they're older because they didn't really count until 2 or 3. And so the early church was known for, they said, look, children are important. God loves children. God loves adoption and families. So they would find the abandoned kids and they would just take them and they would raise them and they would bring them into their homes. So even though there was this legal thing set up that people are doing, the church said that we're going to spread God's kingdom and we're going to care for people and we're going to do what's right. And it eventually changed the entire nation.
Right. And you look at the start and the expansion of the church in Acts.
Right.
And what happened by them being the ones to go out and be the hands and feet of Jesus instead of waiting on the government? Thousands were added every day to those who were saved.
Yes.
God's kingdom grew daily by thousands. That is not happening in America today.
Right.
At least I'm not hearing about it. If thousands are being added to the kingdom every day, I feel like we'd probably hear about it. That would be...
No, I think we're on the church is on the decline, if anything. Continually, we are losing people.
And I think a lot of it is because as people who claim the name of Jesus, we are using his name in vain because we are focusing more on politics
right.
than the person and work of Jesus and sharing that.
Ooh,
We're
that's
focused
good.
more on what I disagree with you about in our country or even in the world, instead of focusing on loving you and pointing you towards the only one who can provide us with hope and peace in this world.
Right. There's two great things there. I think so often as Christians, we think when it says don't use God's name in vain, we just mean that like for cussing. Right.
Yeah.
Where it's like using God to justify something that he does not justify.
That is rubbing his
much
name through
more
the mud. Absolutely.
of a problem. And then I think the second piece of what you said, it's like, honestly, to bring it all around to where we are, it's that we've forgotten that our purpose is to make disciples. First and foremost, because if that is what our focus was, if that is what we all did, none of this other stuff would be the biggest concern that it is. But instead, we make our biggest thing is to make Republican voters. Or
right. That's what I was going to say. Yeah. We've taken the go and make disciples of all nations. Instead, we've interpreted that as go and make Republicans of your nation. Right.
Exactly. Right. And go, just spread other cultural ideas of what the church should be as opposed to follow Jesus and what he says.
Acts 1:8, you will be my witnesses.
Right.
That's Jesus talking. So we are to witness Jesus, share Jesus with others, not share our own whatever else might be. Man.
I was watching The Simpsons yesterday, and Ned Flanders walked into the church and he heard there was somebody playing an electric guitar at the church, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, an electric guitar in the church, how diddly do!" And it's like this hilarious caricature, right?
Yeah.
But how often is that how we are, where we focus on all these things beside who Jesus is and what he's done for us, as like, this is what a Christian, and we're just up and we're fussy about this and that. It's like, maybe just stop.
Let's be like Christ.
Let's just be like Jesus,
who spoke the truth everywhere he went to everyone, but did it in a way with grace and love, drawing you to him instead of drawing you to anything else.
Yeah.
And so that's the example we're supposed to follow. So that's what we should be doing. We should be drawing people to Jesus,
right?
Not to anything else. If we have any other agenda that we're pushing, we're wrong there. We need people. We want people to know Jesus. We need to do what we can to get people to know him. If I truly loved Jesus, if I truly surrendered my life to him and his will, it would look different.
Yeah.
My life would look different. My opinions on social media would look different. My conversations with people, the way I loved my neighbor, it would all look so different. But for some reason, in our comfortable Christianity that we've adopted here in Western civilization, it's, I'm going to live my life, and then every now and then I'll sprinkle a little Jesus in there when it's convenient for me, when it doesn't require me to risk as much. And then, the Jesus truth with that is, what if Jesus decided on his way to the cross, like, you know what? Nah, they don't need that. I'm busy today, or I'm too tired. I'm going to go take a nap.
I'll put a little bit of that in later.
Yeah,
but
maybe, but we'll see.
I've got tables to build.
Yeah, like, let's start sacrificing our own personal comforts and conveniences and opinions for the sake of pointing others towards Jesus.
Yeah,
that's when we're going to see the world change. That's when we're going to see America change. That's when we're going to see God's blessings overflow in our country, is when we actually surrender to the will of Jesus.
Right. I love that. Well, and that kind of, let's take a step into the next thing, which is our Bible reading. And so if you're not aware, if this is your first time joining us, thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. We've been reading through the Bible in a year, and it's not too late. You can still join us. I know, faithful listeners, you've heard this before, but hey, it might be your first time. So check the show notes, check the description on YouTube. There's a link that will take you to the Bible plan. You can jump in, just start where we are, whatever day it is. Just start there and read through the rest of the year with us. Comment in that plan. Let us know what you think. But what you just made me think of is, now I know this goes back a little bit. It's not the current part. But when we read through like Chronicles and Kings and all that, what I saw was a nation that tried to do that, it was God plus, right? It was, we've got God, but we've also going to set up the Asherah poles. We're also going to set up the Baal statues. We're also going to set up the high places, like our write-in said, where the nation of Israel tried to say, let's do all of it. Let's get in all of these things and just make sure that we've got a little bit of everything. It's God is one among many, as opposed to God is first and foremost above everything.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like instead of God plus,
right,
we've moved it to my life plus a little God.
Right.
Right. Like he's the plus now instead of the focus.
Well, and I think isn't that what we do? Again, there's nothing new. Humanity always does this, where we say, let's not make it about what God says. I want to make it about my judgment, my determination, what I think is valuable. Right. I mean, that's back to Eden. That's Adam and Eve. Right. It's God said, don't do this, but I've decided that I know better.
Right.
Right. So God says, hey, I'm first, I'm central. I should be the thing. And we say, no, I'm actually the center of the universe. You can be one of the spokes that radiates out of me.
Right. Yeah. Oh, man. You are not the sun. Everything does not revolve around you.
Wait, the sun revolves around us?
No, we revolve around the sun.
Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
What if we were wrong? What if you've got...
If it was flat
What
Earth?
if we get to heaven, it's a flat earth and the sun moves around us? Wouldn't
that would be
funny?
the greatest prank that Jesus or that God ever pulled. I mean, Jesus was there at creation, so everything was made by him, through him, and for him. So, yeah, that would be awesome, actually.
I just remembered. I know we need to get back to read what we had in the Bible, but just a funny tangent. I had a dream last night. I just remember this, where I was hanging out with Elon Musk on this. He was like, we're going to go on this spaceship thing. And I'm like, sweet, I get to actually go to space. How fun. So we're like riding in this spaceship and it's like shaking and there's like all the stuff is flying by and it's really cool. And then it gets really dark and there's like water everywhere in the spot. We were going to the moon eventually, was what he said. And I'm like, but there's still like, why is there still gravity? And I started to realize that it was all a trick. He didn't really put us in a spaceship. And there was just like a thing that like shook and there were screens on the windows that make it look like we were flying through space.
It was Mission Space from Epcot.
Essentially. Yeah. But then it was like, I was like, wait, if I was on the moon, I'd be like able to jump. There'd be like less gravity, but it was all fake. And I was really disappointed.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. So that's that. What stuck out in the Bible right now to you, man?
Well, another funny, last week I picked just a random funny thing that I was like, what?
Yes.
So this week I was thinking about that. So maybe I was just in tune for things that stuck out as weird. But in Luke chapter 13, some Pharisees approached Jesus, said, go away, leave here, for Herod wants to kill you. And Jesus said, go and tell that fox.
Go tell that fox.
Just a fun little insult about Herod.
Is that it's a weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an insult?
Yeah, I think so.
Why do we use it as a compliment? Like, look at that foxy lady.
Well, that's foxy.
Okay, so foxy is better than if I called somebody a fox.
And we don't really use that anymore. No one uses foxy anymore.
In the 70s we did, though.
Yeah.
Austin Powers 3, her name was Foxy Cleopatra.
Yeah.
So
that's a deep cut. Austin Powers 3.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, as good as those movies are.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you found Herod being called a fox. See, here's the thing. It's not just foxy. You could be like, dude, that person is a fox. In the 70s, you could have said that, and it was a compliment. It gets back to that like context and culture, like when they use words. Yeah. And it gets us even another step back, which is we always kind of, I feel like, come back into this. So important to understand context and culture and all that. And the fact is that we're reading something that was said originally probably in Aramaic and to a language where they don't necessarily have a concept of direct quotation. And they've got a lot of biographical conventions which say it's, you're trying to capture the essence of what was said, not necessarily the word for word of what was said. And so you've got Luke recording this after researching it. So who knows where what his source was for this specific instance. Now in English, 2,000 years later, like the level of things, like there's times in which I really like to dig in and it's like, let's talk about context and let's talk about all this stuff. And people have said, because they've brought up some sort of an issue or concern or whatever. And I'm like, well, it's going to take a little bit to unpack why you're misunderstanding that. And I've heard people say, like, shouldn't it be easier? Like, why? It sounds like you're having to over explain something that's just obviously wrong. And I'm like, no. If you were to really think about the gulf of time and culture we're spanning here, you would be surprised if it wasn't this complicated to
right.
understand.
If it was all super easy and made sense in our culture today, in English, I would question it more and be like, that was written recently. Like, there's no way this is actual content and information from thousands of years ago.
Which is why I get so frustrated. Now, this is going to be maybe a little controversial. I'm going to go a little controversial here. Sorry. But it's why I get as frustrated as I do with like the Kinham types who say what he says is like the straightforward reading of Genesis is the best one you need to go with. But straightforward is not a word that concept doesn't make sense. There's no such thing as a straightforward. There's just your lens of worldview and culture, but a straightforward, quote unquote, reading in English doesn't matter, right? Like we need to get beyond a surface level understanding and this idea that we don't have to do any type of thought or study when it comes to the Bible.
Wouldn't people like that also say, though, if you don't agree with his particular interpretation of it, you're probably not a believer?
Yes. Yeah. Ken Ham has said that if you are not a young earth creationist specifically to that, then you don't believe the Bible and are probably not a Christian.
Right.
I have a problem with that too.
That's a bold reach.
It's a very bold reach. Yeah. Don't put the stuff on the tertiary into the primary. I think we've talked about that
a couple times,
a million times. Yeah. So that's the Bible for the week. Email us, podcast, dfchurch.com. Let us know what stuck out in the Bible to you. To you. I like to say it like that. Matt.
Yeah.
Let's go into our main topic.
Love it.
All right.
We have one?
We have a main topic. Last week, we started talking about what it is. You know, I was thinking as kids are going back to school, students are going to new colleges, it's important to know what to look for in a church. How do you find a church? Right. If you move somewhere new, how do you find where God wants you? How do you find a good church to go to? Cool. This week, we're going to do the second half, maybe the more cynical half, maybe the more negative half. And it's, like I said last week, I don't think it's as easy as, well, it's just the opposite of everything we said. But the question I want to ask is, at what point are you justified, or is it the right thing to do to leave a church and to move on from a church? Now, I think the easiest one and the least tendentious maybe would be if your job moves you to another city, then you can leave that church. And that's not going to be... I
don't have to commute like 1,000 miles.
It's not going to be a sinful thing to say, I've broken fellowship with this church because I'm in a new place and I'm plugging into a new local fellowship that God has for me. You can still stay connected. You can still watch online. You can still keep the relationships with the people you had. But it's also good to probably find somewhere local to plug in, even if you still want to stay connected, because we're all the church, and that's cool.
100%.
You can be in two churches at once. I think that's allowed.
Uh-oh.
I know.
You said something real quick I wanted to bring up. You just said...
I said a lot.
You said, if I move and go to a new church, then it's not a sinful thing, almost implying that if I leave a church, it's a sin.
That's a good point. I think it can be, yeah.
Okay.
I think it could be.
Interesting. Why?
If God has called you to a community and a fellowship, and that is where God wants you to be, to break that would be to break what God has for you. And isn't that the definition of sin?
Okay.
To go a different direction than God wants you. Now, you might say, well, that's spiritual abuse or manipulation or all these things to say that my church is all of that. So I will clarify that. It's very clearly if God has called you, not if I think you're called to my church. Right? You might have a different, where God has you more than I do, right? I cannot tell you God has called you to come to Discovery. Like, I don't think that can be my call to make.
Huh?
But you as a person at whatever church you're at can say, God has called me here, yes or no. And if the answer is yes, and you say, but I just don't want to be there, I would say that'd be sinful because you're going against where God has called you. Now, the tricky part will be we will all find a way to say, well, I think God has called me out. God has called me to move because this church just redecorated and I hate the color.
Yeah, don't blame your personal preferences on God.
And that's where I wanted to get into it is, so what are the good reasons to leave then?
Good reasons to leave a church.
Or what? Let's start with this. What are the bad reasons to leave a church? Start with why. What are bad reasons for you to decide to break fellowship and find a new church?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm gonna throw one out that might be.
Oh boy.
I'm gonna start with this one.
I'm excited.
Disagreements with someone. Like you don't get along with someone. I'm not talking about those primary salvation-based issues, right? As far as doctrine and theology. You and I had an interpersonal issue.
Oh yeah.
And so I leave the church over it.
Ooh.
That is sin. For me to walk away from an interpersonal issue with you is sin because scripture tells me to pursue peace with people.
Right.
If it all up to you, live at peace with everyone.
So what if you've tried to pursue peace and it just doesn't work?
Well, so then that's
what
potentially a different conversation to have. I haven't seen that happen. I've seen people be like, well, that person and we got in an argument, therefore I can never go back to that church.
Really?
And walk away and no longer have that discussion.
Were both people just congregants in this instance? Or
both
one
people
of them...
were congregants in this instance.
Because it'd be like, would it be different if it was congregant and pastor?
Yeah, so if that gets into potentially like reasons to leave.
Okay.
But even if it's a disagreement with the pastor, y'all should talk it out. First of all, the pastor needs to make that effort to have a conversation.
What if he doesn't know there's a problem?
Well, then that's up to you to be like, hey, I had an issue with you. Or you to evaluate, is there really an issue here? Or am I overthinking, overreaching, trying to make a problem when there's not really a problem? Because here's the thing. You can look for reasons to leave every church everywhere. There are always reasons that it's not perfect.
Right.
There's always reasons where there's something in one particular instance that's better somewhere else.
The grass is always greener.
Always greener where you water it. I think I mentioned that last week. Right. So like this whole idea of disunity is not a reason to leave a church on like that initial surface level. Right. Because Proverbs tell us that God hates like disunity amongst people. He hates discord amongst people, not the app. Discord,
right. He might hate the app too.
He probably does. And so doing everything I can to preserve unity amongst people.
I mean, think about what Jesus said. He prays for us to be unified, and he prays for unity in the church, and unity and love as the distinguishing factor of the church. And so if there is disunity, that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah. Yep. And so that covers a whole lot of things, I think, right? Like the personal offenses, the disunity, all that type of stuff. Like scripture is very clear about what to do with those. And it is not turn and walk away.
Okay.
Leave a fellowship, right? So that's a bad reason to leave a church. Your unwillingness to maybe take a step back. Don't leave a church because someone tried to hold you accountable for something or call you out for something.
Ooh, okay.
As Christians, we should want that. We should look for that. And to say, well, I did something wrong. You're not going to say that because you're going to be like, well, I was in the fine.
Right.
But, right, Matthew 18 was followed, and how to handle disagreements was handled well, and you were called out for sin in your life and asked to be held accountable to it.
Yeah.
To walk away and leave from that is a unwillingness to repent, which, again, sin, right?
Sure.
And so we have to be very, very careful because our pride's going to get in the way every time. right? You say, hey, Matt, I've noticed this. You need to work on it. I'm just leaving then. Screw you, right? Like this is that's terrible. That's not a reason to leave.
Right.
I've seen it though.
A
lot where people get called out for something, asked to come in and seek reconciliation and repentance. Like, no, I wasn't in the wrong. That person needs to apologize. I'm not apologizing, whatever it might be, right? So like that's a terrible reason to leave.
So real quick, before we keep going down this, another interesting aspect of this that I don't think maybe gets talked about a lot, but is it ever okay? And I'm asking you this question. It's kind of maybe a loaded question because I think the biblical answer is pretty clear. Is it ever okay for the church to kick somebody out of their church, to break the fellowship for them? So it's not I'm choosing to leave the church. It's my church told me I'm not welcome there anymore.
That's a good reason to leave a church.
If they want, that's a good, right.
If you've been kicked out.
Is it okay for the church to, banish, excommunicate? Those are kind of weird. Excommunicate's kind of weird because they can just go to the church down the street, right? You're not gone from church ever. But what do you think about that from a biblical perspective? That is it okay for the church to ask somebody to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
I do think so. There's a lot that has to go into that. Like you said, it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Reconciliation and repentance are the priorities here.
Right.
Right. That's God's priority.
Right.
If you are someone who's a believer, you've claimed to be a believer,
right,
and you have sinned,
right,
and refused to repent over that,
right,
through conversation, through counseling appointments, whatever it might be, and you just continue to refuse, and it is causing disunity in the fellowship,
right,
then I do think it's within church leadership's right. Lots of prayer, lots of coming to God, lots of seeking the right counseling, but it is within that right, and almost expectation. In fact, I would say a red flag for a church is if they just allow that to continue and happen,
right,
because all that does is continue to grow the disunity and the animosity towards everyone within that congregation. And it's bad for everybody, right? It's allowing a cancerous cell that is super easy to remove to just grow and spread, right?
Sure.
Like I see the cancer, I have the technology. I'm, trying to use this analogy. Like I can remove and eliminate that cancer now and stop it from spreading and killing the entire body.
Right.
Or I can just, it's fine. It's no big deal. Brush it under the rug and it just spreads.
Most people don't want to deal with the confrontation. And most people, like we talked about earlier, if the church is on the decline, you are wary to get rid of anybody because you're like, I need everybody in the seat that I can.
I get that. I hate confrontation.
Right.
But sometimes it's necessary, right?
Right.
Sometimes it has to happen. And so I don't, if there's anyone who's like, oh, I love confrontation, that's probably a red flag, right? Most of us, confrontation is the necessary part, not the desired part, right? The desired part is everyone, like as soon as an issue happens right away, the person who made the offense, like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Oh, no problem. I forgive you. It happens right away. And I don't have to go and be like, hey, like you offended me, or hey, I noticed this in you, or that's a part nobody wants to have to do.
Right.
But sometimes that's important. So
our producer in the room brings up this question: can you leave the church but still have fellowship? And I think the answer is yeah. You obviously can leave and still have fellowship and connection with those people. However, I think if you are in a community and you say, I'm going to step away from that community, but still be a part of that community, it's going to be very hard to keep up the same level of interaction and connection with the person, right? Because it's all well and good to say, oh yeah, we're going to still hang out all the time.
Right.
But when I take away, look, there's a weekly touch point where I get to see you and check in with you no matter what else is going on in my life, and that's removed, it's a lot harder. Like I've got an example of that. Like there was a coworker who me and my wife Lex used to work with, who we used to work literally every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night together. And after the shift, we would all go out to IHOP at like 2 a.m., get, a late night meal. We hung out. We were great friends.
I want to be young again.
I know. I was like, how could I have ever, even back then I was like falling asleep most nights. But after we've all moved on from those jobs, it's much harder to keep relationship. Now, we just had dinner with him and his wife and his kids, and we were talking about it. And the last time we had even seen him was before Christmas. And now we're finally hanging out again. And we're like, we've got to try to be more intentional about this. We've got to do this more. But when you don't have those natural, often occurring connections, it's a lot harder to maintain that close relationship.
Right. So it brings up a different question. If you left for a biblical reason, you need to define fellowship. And like, if you left for a biblical reason,
okay,
and you still want to hang out with everyone else who still goes to that church,
yeah,
why? Like, why would you? Because that means that you're okay with whatever sin is prevalent in that church.
Right.
And you're fine with continuing to allow it and be a part of it.
Right.
Like, if I left that church because of a sinful reason, I think I would come to him and be like, dude, do you not see what's happening here?
Right. So
this is spiritual abuse, or this
100%.
is a huge theology, doctrine issues. This is a salvation issue that we're talking about here.
Right.
Right. Not they changed the paint color, or not someone got into my junk. Like, they know my personal life and I need to go somewhere else where I can hide more.
Yeah.
Like, those are sinful reasons to leave.
Those are bad reasons to leave.
So if
you
left for a good reason to leave, wouldn't you have that conversation with those people that you love and care and want to continue to do the life with?
I think so, but I think that most people would not view preferential purposes as a problem. That's a lot of P's again. By that I mean,
today's episode is sponsored by the letter P.
Sesame Street. It's the letter of the day.
Sunny days. Sorry, continue.
Wait, what's the letter of the day song?
I don't remember.
For the letter of the day.
It's been a hot minute.
Oh, man. So, preferential purposes, preferential reasons, right? Most people view church as a consumer mindset of this is the purpose of church is to serve my needs. And so if I am not getting the needs, if it's not hitting what I need now for me, I'm going to go somewhere else that does. And maybe this is not a good analogy, but it makes sense to me. I don't know if I mentioned this last week. It strikes me as like it's almost like if we treated marriage this way. Can you imagine? And a lot of people do, which is the relationship of marriage is about what I'm getting, what I get. It's all about me. And as soon as I'm not getting what I want, I'm going to go find somebody else who does.
Right.
And that's how that starts. And then you get a divorce and you find somebody else. And then your odds of divorce go up incredibly high because now you've set a precedent in your life that as soon as I'm not getting what I want and I see the other thing that I think is perceived as going to be better, then there's nothing wrong with me leaving this current thing to go to this new one. And I think that applies to a church, right? If you are faithfully plugged in and you're serving and you're connected and you leave for a bad reason, because this other church looks cooler. They've got the new program. They've got everybody's going there. They're talking about how fun it is, flashy lights, whatever. They're doing these things that you perceive as better for you. And so you go there. What's going to stop the next time there's a new cooler, better place to do the same? And we saw that, honestly, without getting into too detail, there's been exodi. Is that the plural of Exodus? Exodi? I don't know. Exoduses, we'll call it. There have been large groups that have left Discovery at certain times or another. And I've know some of them and I've seen what happened where like they all go to one church and a few years later they've scattered and only one or two people who left to go to that church are still at that church.
Right.
They've all moved on to other ones and again and again.
Because I'm not willing to plant my feet and water. I want to go to where someone else has done some watering until it starts to brown up a little bit.
But what was crazy is that I saw like those people had been faithfully plugged in and committed for like 10 years, but didn't last that long at the next place and the next place and the next place. So I think once you set that precedent in your life, it's a slippery slope into being able to just hop whenever.
Right. And then the problem is, let's say, you're plugged in for 10 years, highly invested, great community, whatever. You found something that you liked somewhere else better. So you leave the 10-year church where you have tenure, and you go to a new one and you start hopping around. And for some reason, they feel like they can never go back to that place, even though they're like, maybe something's tugging inside of them, Holy Spirit, saying that was family. Like that's where you were able to grow and connect, but they feel awkward for some reason. It shouldn't be that way. Like just at least speaking from my end, those of you that have like left Discovery over the last however 20 years, when you come back, I'm like, what are you doing here? You went to a different church. Get out. You.
That's like, what you would do?
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, it is so good to see you.
Right.
Welcome home. Right.
We'd be happy to see you again. Yeah.
Welcome back. Like, we're so glad you're here.
So I think maybe part of that would be then maybe there is a subconscious knowledge that it wasn't a good reason to leave, because now you feel like it's like I have to admit that I was wrong, right, and that I shouldn't have left. And that can be hard. That's pride. That's a hard thing to overcome.
Well, and I've heard from people who are part of some of those exoduses like a little later who have said, if all my friends didn't leave, I would have stayed. We loved it here.
So that's another reason. Another bad reason to leave a church is all my friends did it.
Yeah. Right? If all your friends jumped off a cliff, would you do it too?
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a river below and you're on a bungee cord or something, maybe. It could be kind of fun.
Are any of my friends fat kids? Maybe I'll land on them.
What in the world? Oh, my goodness.
That was always the sarcastic response as a kid. If all your friends would jump off a bridge, would you? And I said, yeah, maybe I'll land on a fat kid. You never heard that? It's a common joke.
Yeah.
So what are some legitimate, we can talk about all of these wrong reasons. I think ultimately, yes, preferential, putting that at the top of your list. Everything else is great at this church. It's just, I don't like it anymore.
Yeah. So you need to honestly actually spend time in prayer, seeking God's guidance in this. A lot of times I know people have said, oh, well, we've been praying about it and we just feel like God's calling us somewhere else. No, you haven't. Like, don't lie to me. You haven't been praying about it.
No.
You were personally offended by someone, or someone knows too much of your business, or like this really cool new hip worship leader somewhere else, or this cool pastor who tickles your ears is somewhere else. And so I'm going to go over there. You haven't prayed about it. You haven't actually sought God's. Maybe one time in prayer over dinner, you might have said real quick in passing, hey, God, lead us to the right church. Right. And so you took the next church name that came up as, well, that was God leading me there.
Right.
No. And you said the fun and flashy. Is that what you said earlier about the church?
That. Yeah.
I think those are tools of Satan a lot of times. Like, he's going to use that to cause you talked about people hopping then, to cause you to hop, to not actually get your feet planted somewhere, to actually grow and be discipled and be a world changer for God's kingdom, because that's what Satan's afraid of. If he can get you moving and jumping and causing discord and thinking poorly about different things about different churches, he's winning. Right. He has the victory in your life right now, not Jesus. And so I think we have to be very careful for the reasons we're leaving a church, because every time someone leaves, it causes church hurt.
Right.
Usually for both sides for a while, which causes you to be distracted. It causes you to not be focused on growing God's kingdom. Right. And Satan is winning. I think his greatest tool is church hopping.
And I think that that's
one of his greatest tools.
That's really good. And I think that so often we view success as a church because numbers are one of the big metrics people use. Right. And it's like, well, my church is growing. Yes, but is it growing because you're cannibalizing other churches? Right. And that's been us too. Like, people have left other churches to do a mass exodus to us. And it's almost like, I almost want to say, it's like, should we be a little more particular when people come to us? And again, nobody wants to do that because we like having people. Right. We like the attendance, but I think it should be on us and on every church leader when somebody comes, especially if they say, I want to be a member, to say, why did you leave your last church? Yeah. And did you try to do everything possible to reconcile it before you came here? Yes. And that's a hard conversation that most people don't want to ever have that, but it's probably a good idea as church leaders to do that, to say, to weirdly enough, encourage them, stick with your church unless what they left for was a good reason. So let's talk about that as we kind of bring this to an end. Yeah. When is it okay? When is it time to move on?
You mentioned the word spiritual abuse earlier. I think that's a good reason. If the church leadership is, they're abusing you.
What would that look like?
Yeah. So we've actually, I don't know if they've shared, but we have someone who has been spiritually abused in a previous ministry where they were a part of, and it leads to some pretty significant hurt that lasts a long time. So when you think of abuse in general, like, what do you think of?
Being hurt.
Okay. A lot of times what happens, if you think of like in a relationship, what abuse looks like, a lot of it has to do with control, manipulation, coercion, shaming, all that type of stuff. When it's happening as it relates to your relationship with Jesus and who should be your spiritual leader and guide and mentor, that's where it is. And it's hard to identify. We don't often recognize abuse. You think of, again, a domestic relationship, and when abuse happens in that emotionally, you don't often recognize it because it happens slowly and you've just kind of gotten used to it. And then one day it's like, wait a minute, this has been going on for a long time. Right. And usually by that point, it's even worse, right? I think if you have a pastor who says, God told me that you need to, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be abuse.
That's that abuse right there.
Yeah, that's a red flag right away. So if you're in a place where that's happening, probably good reason to leave.
That's and on a side note, that's a different, like, I feel like throw around the phrase God told me blank way too flippantly, as opposed to think about, like, if we're saying God has given me a message to give to you, what are you acting as at that point? You're essentially acting as a prophet, right?
Right.
Think about what God says about people who claim to be speaking on his behalf in a prophetic sense and who are not. That's a serious offense. Yeah. And yet we kind of flippantly say, well, now we can be in the more generic way of, like, we know that God says, like, sin is wrong, right? To our producer's point, like, I can say that God doesn't want you to sin in this way.
Right.
But that is different than saying God has given me a direct revelation, essentially, to tell you to do this. Yeah. That is where you are, again, kind of taking God's name in vain. You're using God to further your ambition. It's not good.
Yeah. If the spiritual leader is pursuing power and control over people, that's where.
Right. That's
like that. That's kind of the easiest big picture way to summarize spiritual abuse. It's power and control. And so I'm going to use manipulation, coercion, fill in the blank with all these other things to gain that over you. So I can control you.
And ultimately that is what is, like, what defines a cult. Essentially, that's where 100%. Cults are, is that they use those. And so if your church is becoming a cult, that might be a good reason to leave also.
With that, other good reasons to leave. If you're a cult, run.
If your pastor ever starts saying that his words are on the level of Scripture, that's probably bad.
Yep. I think if church leadership is brushing sin under the rug, hiding things, all that, good reasons to first
address it.
Right? Let's be biblical with our interactions with people. Then if we've addressed it, we've confronted, we followed Matthew 18, and then leadership refuses to change and they actually abuse you and turn it and blame you and manipulate you in that sense, then yes, good reason to go. Right. But if you've noticed something in leadership, go have that conversation with them. Right? Seek reconciliation. Seek to see where they're coming from and give both sides an opportunity to repent. Right. Those are important things that you want to do and deal with. But if they refuse to deal with it, then that's right. Because then you're in a place where you're not seeing repentance and healing and growth. If you start to hear heresy being taught,
and I need to be clear, like, heresy, like core critical doctrinal heresy, not just a tertiary issue you don't like. Right. If you're at a church and somebody preaches and they say, take an amillennial view and you tend to be premillennial, that is not heresy that needs to be, I'm leaving this church. If anything, again, have the conversation and say, hey, wait, you said this. Can I ask where you're coming from with that? Let's talk about our interpretive different. Same thing with like, and it always seems to be these things, the end times and the beginning times, right? Creation and the end is where, in some ways I'll say are the most, almost tertiary in the order of belief anyway. Like they matter, but they're not core. But those two things, the beginning and the end, always seem to be the ones that come up as so big, like 7-day creation, young earth versus old earth, however you want to go into how we interpret Genesis and how do we interpret the end in Jesus' second coming.
I wonder if it's because those are the two that require no change in my daily life.
Oh,
right. So if I come and have a conversation with you about the stuff in the middle, that's my living. That's my daily life. That's my preferences. That's my feeling, right? It's about me at that point.
Right.
And that's going to require me to surrender my life to Jesus,
right,
and my will to his will. And it's going to require change on my part. And I don't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to argue with about end times and beginning times. Beginning times already happened. I can't change that.
It's purely an abstract
end times,
head knowledge.
We don't know. It's so far in the future or tomorrow.
Or
who knows? Right? Like, so we can argue about those things without requiring any life change for any party.
Right. And I think it does also come in because, especially end times, when we get into prophecy, there is so much nebulousness to it because there's not a clear answer. I can sit and say, look, I've studied this and I've kind of cracked a code and I've put these pieces together. It almost gives us like, I know more. I've got this almost, that's again, back to that whole Gnosticism, which just runs through everything. It gives you a sense that I know something special that you don't. And because I've put these puzzle pieces together for this end times thing to work, I can say, look, I know the Bible more than you. Even if you're not saying this, the attitude and the feeling that can, not will, but can come out of that is, I've got this little bit of spiritual maturity, knowledge, and wisdom built up. And because you disagree with me, you just don't know the Bible. You haven't studied it like I have. And so I'm going to disagree with you and I'm going to fight about this because this is I know this. I'm smarter than you because of it. And I can hold that knowledge over you. Wow. I'm not saying everybody does that, but I think that could be part of the temptation and the draw of it. It's because it is like nebulous, where it's like, if I were to say, yeah, it's wrong to kill people. It's like, yeah, there's no added studying or mental like puzzle pieces to assemble to get to this conclusion, right? That's a clear thing in the Bible. But the unclear things, the nebulous things where there is different interpretive options available to us.
Yeah.
It's fun to be able to put something together as a solution and say, now I've got it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I don't know. So heresy and spiritual abuse. What else, if any, are good reasons to leave your church? Moving. We already said that.
Right. A major shift in like the mission vision, right? Because when I dig into community, it's because I want to be a part of what's happening there, right? And if all of a sudden everything radically changes, that potentially could be a reason. It isn't like right away, oh, that is a reason to go, but it's something to have conversations with. I think ultimately what happens is we're so flippant with our decision-making when it comes to church that we don't pause, take time to pray and reflect, right? When you give your life to Jesus, we've talked about what the church is, right? My responsibility as a member of the church, Big C church, meaning I'm a Christ follower and I'm part of his body and his community, right? As a member of that, I need to do everything I can to seek that peace and that unity and the growth of the church, both locally and globally. And so any decision I'm making, one, I don't think you should make it alone.
Right.
I think you should seek counsel and have these conversations with other people, because my own mind and my own heart is going to be flawed and skewed and biased towards leaving. Right. If that's a question I'm asking, should I leave? I already have my bias towards, yeah, I should. So I need to get someone else, another perspective, to start talking through why someone who, a biblical perspective, right? Not someone who is just going to say, yeah, do what makes you feel good. Right. Because again, then we're going from church to church for the rest of our life, and Satan's winning because we're not building community. We're not getting in a position where we're going to actually be challenged to grow and held accountable and discipled, and we're not discipling others, and we're not serving because we're constantly going from place to place. Right. And so I think step one, if you're thinking about leaving a church, pray. Actually pray. Right. Do not just say you prayed. Do not just one line in a word or one line in a prayer around dinner time, but daily, continually, regularly seek God's will. Part of your prayer life and part of your connection and communion with him is opening up his word and seeking that. Here's why I'm thinking about leaving. Well, what does scripture say about that? What does scripture say about staying? Right. So pray, connect with God, then seek counsel from someone else. Third party, right? Like, someone not at the church you want to go to, not at the church you want to leave. Right. Seek wise biblical counsel from someone else. Maybe from someone at your church, you could. Someone who you know can at least approach it in a neutral manner. Yeah. And then if through all those things, you've decided that, yeah, this is a good reason to divorce this family. Yeah. Because that's what it is. As a church body, we are family. And so when you have committed to that family and then you leave, you're divorcing that family. Now in the midst of divorce, every now and then there's still those family reunions where you go and you still see people who are part of that family that you divorced from at time. There's potentially still connection that can happen, but you are divorcing a family in this situation. So if you've decided that that's what you're going to do, leave well. You've pursued peace with everyone. You've reconciled with everyone that you might have had a disagreement with. You've actually had an honest conversation with God, an honest conversation with yourself, and an honest conversation with your pastor that you're leaving. Right? Don't make up stuff to try and make us as pastors feel better. Because we know you're lying. We know you're just making up a story. Right? Like, we're smart enough. We've been through this rodeo a few times where we know that there are actual reasons of why you're leaving that you're not sharing. Be honest, because as church leaders, we want to grow. We want to be better. We want to make sure that we're providing a biblical community for people to connect with. And if that's not for you, fine, but be honest with us about it. And I think the biggest issue with the church splits that happen and people leaving churches is we just lie our way through it. We lie to ourselves about it. We're not honest with ourselves about why we're really leaving. So we make up all these other stories. And, if we wanted to, we could talk about specific situations. We're not going to. We won't today. But we could, because time and time again, and I've talked with other pastors too, this isn't a discovery issue, this is a people issue, where they just lie to themselves through their exit. And then you see that again and again and again, and then it becomes a pattern in their life. And again, I go back to Satan's winning in that situation. Anytime he can cause disunity, anytime he can like get you to lie to yourself about stuff, to lie to God about things, like he's winning. Those are his victories. And we're just going to let him have it. Like he just gets that victory. We're not going to fight that. I don't know. I think we should fight him.
You heard it here.
I'm ready to fight.
Fight Satan.
Fight Satan, you guys.
Well, we are going to wrap that up with my AI Ask the AI Anything segment that I enjoy to do, because this time I asked it, what are the 10 worst reasons to leave a church?
Okay.
Now, this is AI's attempt at humor, I think, because I told it you can be a little funny. I told it to be a little funny. All right? I'll start with that.
Tell it.
I prompted it with humorous, especially because it's like, well, we're top 10 worst reasons. That's got to be funny, right?
Yeah.
Number 10, the Wi-Fi signal in the sanctuary isn't strong enough to stream Netflix during the sermon.
That's good. That's good.
Why would you want to? Okay, that's good.
Have you? Just funny side, not funny, sad. We've seen people streaming other sermons on a Sunday morning. Sitting in church service while our pastor's preaching, streaming a different sermon with one little earbud in.
That's too far from the truth. Number 9, they refused to rename the church after my cat, Sir Purr-a-Lot. That's so. What's weird about that is oddly specific. Like AI. When did this happen somewhere?
It happened to AI.
The AI has a cat now.
AI has a cat named Perlat. Sir Perlat.
I like this one. Number 8. I'm upset that the pastor's jokes aren't funny enough to post on social media. That's fair. If they're not funny enough for social media, why are you going to that church?
I apologize for those jokes I shared 2 weeks ago.
Oh, those were hilarious.
Oh, good.
Number 7, the communion bread isn't gluten-free, dairy-free, and free-range organic.
Ooh.
Hey, we're close. We offer gluten-free every time.
Yeah.
Ooh. Number 6, Matt, this one's for you. The coffee at the fellowship hour is decaf. How am I supposed to stay awake during the sermon?
That's an abomination. It's a desecration. It's a fill in the Asians.
Nation.
It's a nation. Yeah. There's a time and a place for decaf. Never and in the trash.
Number 5, someone sat in my pew 3 weeks in a row, and I'm not letting it slide.
Oh, girl, get out of my seat.
There was an entire episode of King of the Hill where that happens. Somebody new comes to his church, Hank Hill's church, and so he's like, "This is where I sit," and they're like, "Oh, sorry," and he's like, "No, but that's okay, you can move." And then then they go to the pastor and say, "Can we do a seating chart at our church?" And the pastor's like, "No," and so then they leave the church. He like breaks fellowship. He goes to a mega church, and then the mega church is too involved in his life. They keep calling him and asking him to, like, "Hey, do you want to go to this men's thing? Hey, do you want to come do this? Hey, do you want?" And he gets tired of that, and he quits that church too. Huh. It's actually, that episode's a really good one to talk about with like church hopping stuff. Highly recommend. Go watch the episode of King of the Hill where he leaves his church. You're gonna get some interesting insight into church hopping. It's a good episode.
I love it.
Number 4, the youth group refused to let me join their dodgeball team because I'm 40.
That's why you volunteer for the youth group as a 40-year-old. Then you can throw the dodgeballs at the kids. Yeah.
Number 3, I discovered the church isn't actually a Pokemon Go gym. Ours is.
Good news is we do have a Pokemon Go gym here at our church. So Pokemon Go players, come on over. We got a few people that play. I'll meet you at the gym.
That's funny because putting in Pokemon Go, that's clever. Number 2, they didn't sing the extended version of the doxology with all 27 verses.
There's 27 verses of the doxology?
According to this, there are.
That's praise God from whom all blessings. Okay, sweet.
Yeah. So that one's funny as the second worst reason, but that sentiment
is a common
is
reason.
a very common reason people leave churches.
You don't play enough hymns. You don't do enough choruses. Yep. You don't do the song I like better. You did this song 2 weeks in a row and I didn't like it. So many reasons to leave, you guys.
And number 1 for the worst reason to leave a church, I'm still waiting for a personal thank you note from the pastor for that $5 I put in the offering plate 2 years ago.
That would imply that the pastor knows that you gave, which
that would a good
which
point.
For some people that would be an issue
be a problem.
Also. Yeah.
But so how about the sentiment behind it, which is I'm not appreciated enough here.
Right. So quick question.
Okay.
Did this person give $5 cash anonymously or did they donate it with their name?
It's an AI. I don't know.
Because they did get a thank you note from our senior pastor, not about the $5, but thank you for giving to the Ministry of Discovery. So come on back. You got your letter.
But he's an AI.
Come on.
Can the AI come? Can the AI come to our church?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. AI's already here.
But could it attend?
This podcast is actually fully AI. Nathan and I are not currently
We are
speaking.
just entirely fake.
Yeah,
no, we're not. It's not that good yet. Although I was messing around with the new AI image model that can do a very good Trump impression.
Real quick, you brought up a question there. You said the appreciation thing. So not necessarily about the money, but just being appreciated.
Not appreciated at your church.
So there's a couple ways we can look at it. One, are you serving? Are you there looking for human validation? Because if you are, that's not necessarily a great thing. But at the same time, as a church leader, my mind is a mess all the time. That's not as a church leader, just Matt Braggins, right? And so that means that when it comes to me appreciating my volunteers, I do a really bad job because I don't think through that because I don't look for that myself. I don't look for that validation. It's not a bad thing for you to appreciate that, but the words of affirmation aren't necessarily what I need on a regular basis.
Right.
And so I forget that others might need that too. And so, when I give you the high five, when, I see you, like that's me appreciating you and validating you.
Right.
But I know for a lot of people, and I've learned this over the years, they need more, they want more. And so my encouragement, if you feel like you're not appreciated or getting that validation that you're searching for, talk to the person who like you want or need that from, because most likely they don't know.
Right.
Because we all feel valued differently.
Right.
And so the person that you're expecting, you're the person who heads up wherever you're volunteering, they probably just don't know that that's what you want and need. Some people have the natural like gifting of encouragement and they're fantastic at it.
Yep.
Others, we suck at it.
Oh,
that's me. Right. And so like, it's okay to say, hey, Matt, I mean, I've been serving with you for 37 years and you've never said thank you to me once. And I need that. Yeah. I'm going to give you a hug right there. I'm going to say thank you so much. I absolutely cannot nor do not want to do this ministry without you. In fact, if I did want to do it without you, I would have told you that part. Right? Right. Like I would have said, hey, thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
But
I think the tricky part with that specific kind of words of affirmation is that there can be a feeling like if I have to ask for it, then it loses its value.
Yeah.
And so it's tough. But I think you're right. The best thing for any type of conflict is talk about it, because it most likely is a misunderstanding versus maliciousness.
100%. Yeah.
But we
99%,
oftentimes,
right? Every now and then there's
we go to, there's a quote, a video I saw once that was great, where he said, never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that's so good.
Oftentimes we assume that there was a malicious intention where it was really just ignorance or a misunderstanding.
Moment of honesty. I'm dumb. Like in a lot of, like I am ignorant and oblivious to a lot of things that other people might be like, dude, that was obvious. Why didn't you do something about that or say something or see something? Right. Like I'm dumb. So yeah, for me, it is ignorance. It's not malicious intent.
Right.
Think of like your marriage too. If there is a need that you have in your marriage and you don't communicate that to your spouse, you're living in bitterness.
Right.
For again, chances are your spouse wants to meet that need or wants to have that conversation with you about what that looks like.
Right.
But they don't know. Because again, I'm dumb. I don't know. Tell me what you want.
What you really, really want.
Right. And here's the thing. I want to meet that need.
Sure.
Right. It's not, this person needs me to tell them thank you or write them a note or bring them a cup of coffee. I can't believe it. That's how that person knows that they're valued and loved.
Right.
Sweet. I want to make sure they know that. Now that I know how to do that, I'm going to do it not begrudgingly, but because I want you to know that you're a valued part of this community. Like, have a conversation with somebody, y'all.
Love it. Well, let's wrap up with our listener comments and email. Again, you can email podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com, or comment on the YouTube video. Matt, I'm going to give you these rapid fire. You tell me what we were talking about. Ready? Search it out like the Bereans last week.
Something. We're talking about something.
Okay. Experience matters more than truth.
Hang on. Pause for just a second.
Wait, the experience matters more than truth?
Remember when I just said I was dumb?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. That's why this is
so
funny.
Here's what's funny. Right before we started recording this podcast, I asked Nathan, what are we talking about today? He's like, part 2. I was like, part 2 of what? Part 2 of what we started last week. What did we talk about last week, Nathan? I totally forgot. So, yeah. Okay.
Experience matters more than truth.
My guess is this was a comment about like what people often say or will do, because we were talking about what to look for in a church, right? Cool. That's what we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Growing the next gen as we're all growing and maturing.
Yeah. Nice. I don't know what we were talking about that time.
This next one. Ready?
It's just a face.
It's just the emoji.
The emoji. Oh, I probably said something controversial.
And that one doesn't even have a timestamp with it. So who knows what they were talking about? Next one. Give page references in the church Bible.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about
insider language.
Insider language and stuff. Yep. Which I meant to do this week or this past Sunday. Did you notice though, this past Sunday, I did give a little more context to the passages we were opening to,
that was good.
Who wrote it, why it matters. I added that morning because of what we talked about on our podcast.
I like this next one. It just says Casa Bonita.
Yeah.
Now I'm assuming remember you were talking about stopping at the worst taco place.
Mexican food.
Maybe he said Casa Bonita, but they are not any longer the worst Mexican restaurant. Their food is actually
because
decent.
of that place I went to last week.
Well, no, because they've actually remodeled. After the South Park guys reopened it.
Is it still like $50 a person or something?
Yeah, it's still too expensive. But the amount of entertainment you get there is worth it.
But
like there's a ton to do.
If I'm going to spend $50 a person,
yeah.
I'm going to like the Still Whiskey Steakhouse where I'm not driving an hour
will not
each
get
way.
to see a Luchador Magic show at the Still Whiskey
I get a delicious
Steakhouse.
steak.
It's true. Casa Bonita, for those of you who have not been, awesome. Definitely worth going, especially now that it's been revamped. It's everything. It's like it was when we were kids. Not you, because you weren't here, but better.
It's like the Disneyland of Denver.
Yeah, of Mexican food restaurants.
Yeah.
It's also, there is some sort of weird like quantum something happening there because it's this tiny little strip mall, and then you walk in and it is so big.
Right.
I don't know how it fits.
It's underground.
Is
like
it?
Disneyland.
Is that just how they do it? It doesn't feel like
Disney
you
World.
go underground though.
No, you
it's
do.
amazing.
You don't.
It's amazing. So,
and it's like a maze. You can get lost in that place. Amazing. So that joke is not social mediaable.
That is all the time we have for today. Next week, we're going to have a special guest on remotely. Our good friend Mike Pence will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about honestly kind of what it means to be human as technology increases, because that is a interesting thing. As we see the world rapidly developing around us, the plan will be then we're talking about what does that still look like? At what point, if any, do we stop even being considered human? Tune in next week to answer that question.
Okay.
We'll see you then.
Bye, guys.